I've always believed that life changes slowly, like seasons shifting in the background. But some moments arrive like a sudden storm, unannounced, uninvited, leaving you standing in the ruins of the world you thought you knew. That day began like any other. Quiet, ordinary, utterly forgettable, or so I thought. The house was wrapped in the kind of stillness that feels almost fragile. George was at work, and I had been enjoying the rare silence, letting the world settle around me. Then I heard it, a faint sound drifting from upstairs, soft, uneven, nervous. Elliot was in his room. At 23, he spent most of his time isolated in his thoughts, lost in his music, his projects, his private universe. I assumed he was working on something again. Maybe I'd bring him coffee, I thought. Just a small gesture. But as I climbed the stairs, the noises sharpened. Hurried shuffling, papers moving, something being pushed aside with urgency. An odd tightness coiled in my chest. His door was slightly open, just enough for a sliver of blue light to escape into the hallway. I lifted my hand to knock, but my eyes drifted toward the gap, and in that split second, everything inside me stilled. Elliot sat on the edge of his bed, shoulders rigid, the glow of his laptop painting his face in cold blue. Except, the expression on his face wasn't concentration. It was panic. Raw, visible, unmistakable. His fingers scrambled across the keyboard, trying to close something, hide something, erase something before anyone could witness it. I didn't understand what he was doing. But his fear, that was undeniable. It pulsed in the air like a heartbeat. When our eyes finally met, the blood drained from his face. "Darlene," he whispered, voice cracking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to see that." A wave of emotion surged through me. Confusion, worry, guilt for intruding, and something else I couldn't yet name. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stepped into the room without meaning to, words catching in my throat. The atmosphere felt charged, suffocating. He slammed the laptop shut, clutching it against him like a shield. I took a step back, heat rising beneath my skin. I'm sorry. I should have knocked," I stammered, barely audible. Then I slipped into the hallway, pressing my hands to my face. What had I just seen? What was he hiding? Why did he look so terrified? Elliot wasn't a child. He was a man, grown, independent, carrying burdens I might never understand. But seeing him like that, shaken, ashamed, afraid, stirred something deep within me. Something that felt almost maternal, and yet not quite. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, and for the first time in years, he looked fragile, smaller, as if the weight of some enormous truth had crushed the confidence out of him. "Darlene," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "I really didn't want you to walk in on that. I thought I closed the door." "No," I answered quickly. "It's all right. I shouldn't have barged in." Silence settled between us like fog, thick, cold, unfamiliar. We'd lived under the same roof for years, but suddenly, neither of us knew how to stand in the same space, what to do with our hands, where to rest our eyes, how to breathe. "I should start dinner," I murmured, turning away before my emotions could betray me. He didn't stop me. He didn't say another word. He just watched, uncertain, heavy-hearted, as I walked down the stairs and disappeared into the kitchen. And even as I reached for the stove, one truth echoed through me. Whatever Elliot was hiding, it was big, and that moment was only the beginning. I spent the rest of that evening trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't stop replaying the moment, the look on Elliot's face, the panic in his eyes, the way he held his laptop as if it were a lifeline. I kept telling myself it was nothing. He was an adult. Everyone has private moments, personal worries, hidden stresses. But something about his expression had unsettled me deeply. At dinner, the silence felt heavier than usual. Not angry, not cold, just fragile. We both kept our heads down, focusing on our plates, pretending everything was normal even though it clearly wasn't. Every sound, the scrape of a fork, the clatter of a glass, seemed sharper, louder, as if the house itself sensed the shift between us. Over the next few days, we moved through the house carefully, almost cautiously. We spoke when necessary. Simple questions, small talk, but the natural ease between us was gone. It felt like we were both standing on opposite sides of a moment that had changed something we couldn't quite name. Then, one quiet afternoon, while I was sorting through some papers in the living room, Elliot walked in. He hesitated at first, lingering by the doorway as if deciding whether to stay or retreat. Finally, he sat down beside me, his hands clasped tightly together. "Darlene," he began softly. "About the other day. I'm really sorry. I never wanted you to see me like that, and I don't want things to feel strange between us." His voice wavered, not with fear of being caught doing something wrong, but with something far more vulnerable. He was afraid of losing honesty, connection, trust. I exhaled slowly. "Elliot, you don't owe me an apology," I said gently. "Everyone has moments they'd rather keep private. Believe me, I've had my share too." A flicker of relief crossed his face. The tightness in his shoulders eased, and he let out a shaky breath, almost a laugh. It felt like the room itself exhaled with him. To ease the tension, I shared a few embarrassing stories of my own. Small, harmless things, but enough to remind him that imperfection was part of being human. As I spoke, I watched something soften in him, a quiet gratitude settling in his expression. But even as the moment lightened, I felt an undercurrent of something deeper, an awareness that whatever had shifted between us hadn't settled back into place. The roles, the distance, the familiar lines, they all felt slightly blurred now, as if the moment at his door had pulled back a layer neither of us expected. Elliot gave a small, hesitant smile. "I guess we're even now," he murmured. I turned to him, confused. "Even? What do you mean by that?" His smile faded instantly. Regret flashed across his face, quick, unmistakable. It was the look of someone who hadn't meant to speak out loud. He rubbed the back of his neck nervously, searching for words. "I shouldn't have said that. It just slipped." A quiet tension filled the space between us. Something unsaid, something fragile. After a long pause, he spoke again, this time with quiet reluctance. "There was a moment," he said carefully, "a long time ago, when I saw you during a time you didn't know anyone was around. It wasn't embarrassing, nothing like that. Just personal. And I never mentioned it, because I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable." The room seemed to still around us. Not fear, not impropriety, just the sting of unexpected honesty. Two people realizing they had unknowingly held small, human vulnerabilities in front of each other. My heartbeat thudded softly in my ears. Not because of what he said, but because of what it revealed. We had both been carrying unspoken worries, assumptions, and emotional distance. Elliot finally looked up at me, and I saw something raw in his eyes, an earnest fear of disappointing me, of breaking some invisible trust he valued more than he ever said. The moment wasn't inappropriate, it was human. A reminder of how easily misunderstandings can grow in silence. From that day forward, something subtle shifted between us. Not dangerous, not forbidden, but honest. Real. A quiet recognition that we both carried fears neither of us had ever voiced, and that maybe, without meaning to, we were learning to understand each other in a way we never had before. Everything changed after that day. There had always been a polite distance between us. Familiar, but measured. Predictable, but comfortable. Yet suddenly, that distance felt different, thinner, as though life itself was nudging us into the same small corners of the house more often than before. We began spending more time near each other without really planning to. Watching movies late at night when neither of us could sleep. Sharing leftovers at odd hours. Talking about work, stress, the little frustrations of daily life. Tiny interactions, harmless on the surface, yet carrying a quiet weight neither of us dared to acknowledge. Sometimes our hands brushed while reaching for the remote. Sometimes we laughed at the same moment and fell silent right after, aware of something unspoken in the room. Not attraction, but connection, recognition, a feeling of being understood without explanation. I pushed those thoughts aside every time. He was clearly struggling with something, and the last thing I wanted was for him to confuse emotional exhaustion with closeness. I told myself that what we needed most were boundaries, clear, firm, steady. One night, unable to sleep, I finally made up my mind. I needed to talk to him, to check on him properly, to understand the storm behind his eyes that he tried so hard to hide. The hallway was dim as I walked toward his room. His door was slightly open, the warm glow of a lamp spilling across the floor. I hesitated, then stepped inside quietly. Elliot was asleep, but his face wasn't peaceful. It was tense, troubled, as if even in his dreams he was carrying the weight of something he couldn't set down. That's when I noticed his desk. Papers were scattered everywhere. Documents, overdue notices, bills, and medical forms jumbled together in a frantic, desperate mess. My heart clenched. This was what he'd been struggling with. This was the secret behind the panic I'd seen in his eyes. Financial pressure, medical concerns, responsibilities he was trying to shoulder alone. A wave of guilt and heartbreak washed over me. Not because he hid it, but because he felt he had to. I stepped back quietly, returning to my room with my chest tight and my mind racing. It was clear now that something far deeper was happening in his life, something he hadn't said out loud. And the more the emotional distance between us faded, the more complicated everything felt. Not inappropriate, just human, raw, real. Then, a few nights later, everything cracked open. The front door slammed so hard it rattled the frame. I jolted awake, the sound echoing through the house. Something clattered to the floor. A table, maybe. George didn't stir. He never did. I hurried out of my room and found Elliot swaying unsteadily in the hallway, clearly drunk. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, filled with exhaustion rather than rebellion. "Elliot," I whispered urgently, grabbing his arm. "You can't be like this. Please, stay quiet. Come here before you hurt yourself." But he didn't move. Instead, he blinked at me like he was trying to figure out if I was real. "Darlene," he murmured, voice thick and slurred. "Are you really here?" There was no desire in his eyes, no confusion, just the unmistakable look of someone who had been holding too much for too long. Someone who finally hit the limit of what he could endure alone. He managed a soft, broken smile, the kind people give when they're trying not to fall apart. And in that moment, I realized just how deeply his pain ran, and how much he had been hiding behind quiet dinners, fleeting smiles, and late-night conversations.